Today's video looks at action statements. For our class example, we're using this business rule that comes with version 6. It refers to resource and restriction. If you are not familiar with this, in version 6 we have created the resource dimension, which is similar to allocated functions. If you're watching this with a 5-4 mindset, this would be talking about allocated functions every time I talk about resource. We're using a business rule where the event is the end of the line, a ledger entry line, end of line. So whenever they're posting new line, these rules are kicking into place. This rule set is called validate resource and restriction. When Carl created it, he just named it that and hooked it to the end of line event. We're looking now at the details part of this business rule set, remembering that each one of these are separate rules, but there's a logical connectivity between each column. If you're familiar with programming, the different columns are similar to a decision tree, a very sophisticated decision tree. Is this the case? Yes. In this case, no. So forth. Gives you different branches of a decision tree, similar to what you would have in programming, where you would have, in programming jargon, you would have a diamond, go this way if yes, and go this way if no, and so forth. That's what we're trying to do here with each of the columns, almost like programming a decision function in a program. Our topic last time were these conditional statements, if, or, if. Today's topic is on action statements. Now we have roughly 10 action statements that we need to get exposed to, but the three big ones we're going to cover in detail today, and that would be a display action statement, error action statement, and a set action statements. Those are the workhorse action statements. The other ones, I'll list them and help you to understand what they all are, but they are not as powerful as what these three. And so almost all the business rules in Sun Plus are made with set, display, or error action statements. So we're going to go over them, starting first with display, and then error, and then finally with set. So since we're focusing on display first, let's go over here. You see the X. So these are the decisions going on these conditional statements. And when everything is met, then this action statement with the X is done. This action statement says display resource is UFTF. So the action statement, the resource is set to UFTF, therefore restriction has been set to 3. So if it's UFTF, the restriction should be 3 according to these business rules. Let's go through the rules here. This is saying if the account is greater than 500, that would be revenue and expense accounts, it's less than 9Z. This is an interesting group of conditional statements here. These are all no. There are equal signs there and no there. So this column is saying they're not equal to N, it's not equal to ACN, and it's not equal to ADN, it's not ATN. So it's basically saying that if any of these business units, NGO, nonprofits over in ADRA, the ACN business unit, the ADN business unit, and the ATN business unit, if it's not any of those, then keep on working this rule. So if it's anything else, apply the rule. That's what we're trying to do. So if it's not any of these business units, then we go down here to Ledger Analysis 1, L1, that's resource. So it is resource tithe funds. Unallocated tithe fund is Y, and restriction is not 3. Own revenue and expense accounts, not the transfer account, not these business units. If it's UFTF, it should be restriction 3, but it is not. So we're sending an error message, and all it does is display the error message. Display means it shows the error message, but it doesn't stop processing. Processing can continue. If we're looking solely at this rule here, if these conditions are met, just send that error message. Allow allow them to continue. If they're bound and determined to set a different restriction for UFTF, they would be allowed to do it. So that's what the display action statement does. So the display action statement only sends a message without stopping processing. In this next one that we're looking at, the error message statement, we'll go through the same thing here, and you can see sort of the beauty of the idea of a rule set. So these rule sets are basically focusing all on the same environment, the same situation, except for here you see yes and then no. In this rule set, it is a revenue or expense account. It's not the 9Z account. It's not any of these excluded business units that are excluded from the rule. It is UFNT, but the restriction is not 0. Then it is going to give an error message. So these conditions being met, throws this actions, it sees the X, and then it comes through here and it stops processing. Error means it stops processing and gives the error message. Before you get all heated of why the other one was just displayed and why this one stopped, is because I changed it from display to error just so we had something to look at. The real business rule is displayed, both of these just displayed the message. But for our class purposes, this X right here and the error type of action statement would mean that processing stopped. It will not post. They have to go back and fix it and try to create a new line again with the change and then roll on. So in that case would be where you had guidance to give the user and wouldn't let them make a mistake. The first one, display, was guidance to the user, but you allowed them to make a mistake. This is guidance to the user and you don't let them go forward until they fix the problem. Two very powerful action statements in business rule. The display just shows a message, error stops it. This next business rule action statement is the set. Well, set actually changes the world. So let's look at this one. We'll go down this rule here and it says, is it a revenue and expense account? Not the 9Z account. It is below 9Z, so it's not the 9Z account. It's not any of these excluded business units. And UFTF is yes, so the resource is UFTF, and the restriction is not 3. If it were 3, that's right if it's 3. So it's trying to force everyone to use 3, and so it's UFTF, but it's not 3 like it's supposed to be, and so it's coming down here and it says set ledger analysis 5 to 3. So it doesn't matter what they put in, it's getting changed to 3. And now if we take these together, what I believe Carl had in mind when he created it was that he changed it to 3 and he let the user know that he had changed it. So if it's UFTF, it got changed to a 3. And when we go over to this one, it's the same logic, except for it's UFNT, it gets changed to a 0. And so that's what the business rule is trying to do. So the set, when it sees this, it takes the value and it sets the ledger analysis 5 to 3 and the ledger analysis 5 to 0 in each of these columns. The beauty of set is it fixes the error. You can see we moved from just showing the user the error or stopping the user from making the error to actually fixing the error. So any value on ledger entry can be assigned with a set. If there's always a certain analysis code that goes with a certain account, it can be set. If you always want a certain description to go with a certain account, it can be set. Any combination of input, when something can be fired off, you can have the ledger value set for that value. Any value on that ledger entry screen can be forced to a value based on these conditions. So if a certain account needs to have a certain ledger analysis code, you can require it. If a certain account can only be used with a certain fund, you can require it. You can display an error message. You can just stop it until the user fixes it, or you can just set it. So if asset acquired, for example, is a Fund 20 account, you can make Fund 20 always be the fund if that account is being used. Without really giving choice, you can display guidance, you can stop them from making the error until they go back and fix it, or you can just go back and make the business rule set the value like it ought to be. And those are the three big, most powerful action statements that we use over and over again. Now, for the sake of completion, we want to look at the other action statements that you can have. There's about 3 that relate to workspaces that I'm going to go over in the workspace video. There is other action statements that are not workspace that I haven't shown you here. For example, really wild is that you can have, if a condition is met, you can have Sun Systems call or run a COBOL program. These are wild, powerful things that basically fire off a different computer program that does a process whenever the condition is met. You have all kinds of possibilities there, but the business rule actually fires off another program to do a calculation. Those are the 2 action statements called call and run. You can read about those in the help menu about calling a COBOL program from a business rule. And those are where you call a COBOL function or you run another COBOL program. There's another action statement that automatically sets something as reconciled in the reconciliation manager. That is, when it's being entered, it goes and finds an open item in the reconciliation manager and marks the item as reconciled, slightly beyond the purpose of this course. So those are the rest of the other that we want to talk about. I'm just mentioning the call and the run, bring in a COBOL program. The match involves the reconciliation manager. Now we have 2 more action statements, like I said, that have to do with workspaces. So the next video is about workspaces. It's extremely powerful and interesting, so you want to make sure you watch that.